Welcome to the first episode of The Apprentice and the Hunter, an intense series filled with dark forces, supernatural encounters, and the battle between light and shadow. In this episode, Ethan Cooper, a rebellious 19-year-old, meets Gabriel Walker, a seasoned hunter, and is thrust into a world of terrifying supernatural beings. Follow their journey as they confront their fears and uncover the dark forces lurking in the shadows. If you're a fan of supernatural thrillers, ghost hunts, and intense battles with the unknown, this series is for you. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the next episodes in the series. It all started in my quiet, unremarkable hometown. People like to romanticize small towns, but I couldn't wait to escape mine. Small towns have a way of making you feel trapped, especially when you're a 19-year-old who's been branded a screw-up. School never made sense to me. Endless textbooks, useless facts, and pointless lectures. I was more interested in causing trouble, hanging out with friends, and ignoring every plea my parents made to get my act together. My name's Ethan Cooper, and back then, I didn't think my life had much of a future. I had been kicked out of school for fighting one too many times, and my relationship with my parents was hanging by a thread. We argued constantly. It wasn't like I hated them or anything, but the more they tried to control my life, the more I resisted. So, I did what I thought was best. I packed up my things, left that suffocating little town behind, and headed to the city. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for. Maybe just freedom, or maybe I just needed to prove I didn't need anyone telling me what to do. The city was everything I hoped it would be. Vast, loud, and full of people who didn't care where you came from. For a while, I thought I had found my place. I crashed with some friends, picked up a few odd jobs, and got to experience the rush of city life. But the city has shadows too, dark ones. It wasn't long before I noticed things that didn't quite make sense. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. I'd walk through the streets at night and catch glimpses of strange figures in the corners of my vision. Always there, but never fully visible. And when I turned to get a better look, they'd be gone. It wasn't just my imagination. The air was heavy with a kind of tension I couldn't explain. Felt like something was watching me, following me. The city's noise couldn't drown it out, the feeling of being prey. One night, after working a late shift at a warehouse job I hated, I decided to take a shortcut through an alley. That's when I saw him, Gabriel Walker. He wasn't like anyone I had ever met. Tall, brooding, with an intensity in his eyes that made you stop and take notice. At first, I thought he was just another stranger in the city's endless sea of faces. But there was something off about the way he moved. Purposeful, alert. He noticed me too. I remember thinking it was odd. The way he looked directly at me, as if he knew something I didn't. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low but firm. I laughed it off, brushing past him. "It's just an alley. What's the worst that could happen?" "You don't want to know," he replied cryptically. And before I could ask what he meant, the air grew colder. I saw movement from the shadows again, but this time it wasn't just a figure at the edge of my vision. Stepped out a man, or at least something that looked like one. Gabriel acted fast, faster than I could have reacted. Anyway, in the blink of an eye, he drew something, looked like a blade, and engaged the thing. The fight was swift, brutal, and over before I even processed what had happened. The thing was gone, evaporating into the night like it had never been there. "What the hell was that?" I shouted. Gabriel wiped the blade, unfazed. "You saw it? It wasn't a question. That was the night everything changed." Gabriel didn't leave me with much of a choice. After saving my life, he explained that the creature I had seen was just the tip of the iceberg. Evil things roamed the city. Monsters, demons, spirits, things most people never notice. But I had noticed. And once you see them, once you know they exist, you can't go back to pretending they don't. Gabriel told me he had been hunting these things for years. He worked alone. Always had. But after what I'd seen, I was a liability. The creatures could sense when someone had seen them, and they would come for me eventually. Gabriel said the only way to survive was to learn to fight, learn to defend myself. At first, I refused. I wasn't interested in playing hero. I just wanted to get back to my life, my freedom. But Gabriel was right. Things got worse. Every night, the shadows seemed to close in. I felt them watching, waiting. So I agreed. I became his apprentice. Training with Gabriel wasn't like anything I had expected. He didn't just teach me how to fight. He taught me about the things that lived in the darkness, how to identify them, how to stop them. The first lesson was that not all of them were physical. Some were spirits, some were manifestations of ancient curses. And every encounter was different. Gabriel wasn't big on talking about his past, but I could tell he had been through a lot. There was a weight to the way he carried himself. And for all his skill, I could see that this life had taken a toll on him. Our first real hunt was in an old abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. People had been disappearing, and locals whispered about ghosts. Gabriel was convinced it wasn't ghosts but something far worse. He was right. Inside, we found what looked like a person, but it wasn't. It moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Gabriel motioned for me to stay back, but I didn't listen. I thought I could handle it. I was wrong. The thing came at me faster than I could react, and if it wasn't for Gabriel's quick intervention, I wouldn't be here to tell the story. I learned two things that night. These creatures were deadly, and I still had a lot to learn. As time passed, I began to understand why Gabriel had chosen this life. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. But it was also more than that. There was a darkness inside of him, a need to hunt these creatures, like they were connected to something in his past. We took on more hunts, and with each one, I could feel myself changing. I wasn't the same rebellious kid who had left home. The more I fought, the more I believed in the things Gabriel had warned me about. The world wasn't just what you could see. There was something else lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to strike. One night, after a particularly brutal fight with a poltergeist, Gabriel opened up just a little. He told me about his first encounter with the supernatural, about the loss he had suffered, and how that had set him on this path. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to realize that this life came with a price. As my training continued, I found myself growing more confident in my abilities. But with that confidence came danger. I started taking risks, pushing boundaries, trying to prove to Gabriel and to myself that I was ready. Gabriel warned me not to let my ego get in the way. The moment you think you're invincible, he said, is the moment you're dead. I should have listened. We were tracking a powerful entity, something ancient and dangerous. Gabriel had been hunting it for years, and now it was close. Too close. We found it in an old church, long abandoned and forgotten by the city. The place reeked of death. I thought I could take it. I was wrong again. It nearly killed me, and if it hadn't been for Gabriel, I wouldn't have made it out alive. But it wasn't just the creature that left its mark on me. That night, I realized something. This life, this fight, it would never end. The creatures were everywhere, and they weren't going to stop. Neither was I. After the church incident, something changed in me. It wasn't just physical. I had scars to prove that. But mentally, I felt a shift. The world I thought I understood was no longer just about surviving day to day or chasing freedom. It was about understanding the deep, unsettling truth that most people didn't even know existed. That the creatures Gabriel and I fought were only part of a much larger, darker reality. As I spent more time with Gabriel, he began to trust me with more complex hunts and deeper knowledge about the creatures we faced. This knowledge, however, came with a price. The more I learned, the more I felt disconnected from the world I once knew. I couldn't talk to my old friends about what I was doing. They wouldn't understand. Even talking to my family felt wrong, like I was living in a parallel reality that they would never be part of. Gabriel warned me about this. Knowledge is power, he would say, but it's also a burden. The more you know, the harder it is to turn back. One particular case stood out. We were called to investigate a series of mysterious deaths at an old library on the outskirts of the city. The victims had been found with strange symbols carved into their skin, and their eyes had turned completely black. Gabriel immediately recognized the markings as part of an ancient ritual, something he hadn't seen in years. As we delved deeper into the case, I began to feel the weight of the knowledge Gabriel had warned me about. The creature responsible for the deaths wasn't just any demon. It was something far older, something that fed off knowledge and secrets. The more we learned about it, the more it gained power over us. The hunt was one of the most dangerous we had faced. I remember the suffocating feeling of walking into that library, the air thick with a malevolent energy. The walls seemed to close in around us, and the bookshelves cast long, sinister shadows. It was there, lurking among the books, waiting for us. I nearly didn't make it out. The creature latched onto my mind, feeding off my thoughts, my fears. Gabriel managed to banish it, but not before it left a mark on me. A lingering darkness in the back of my mind. From that day on, I could feel its presence, like a shadow that never fully went away. Gabriel told me that some hunts leave more than just physical scars. There's always a price, he said, and sometimes it's your mind. One night, after a particularly brutal hunt, Gabriel and I sat in a rundown diner, eating cold fries and drinking coffee that tasted like dirt. We were both exhausted, our clothes still covered in dirt and blood. As we sat there in silence, Gabriel finally opened up about something I had always been curious about, his past. He told me about his family, or what was left of them. Gabriel had once had a family, a wife and a daughter, but they were gone now, taken by the very creatures he now hunted. He didn't go into detail, but I could see the pain in his eyes. It was the kind of pain that never really goes away, the kind that stays with you, gnawing at the edges of your soul. That night, I realized that Gabriel wasn't just fighting to protect others. He was fighting for something he had lost. And in a way, I understood him better than I ever had before. I had left my family behind, thinking that running away would solve my problems. But now, after everything I had seen, I realized that family wasn't something you could just walk away from. I found myself thinking more and more about my parents. I wondered if they ever thought about me, if they missed me. But after everything I had been through, I didn't know how to go back to them. How could I explain the things I had seen, the things I had done? How could I look them in the eye and tell them that their son was now a hunter of monsters? As the months went by, I became more skilled in the art of hunting. Gabriel trusted me more, and I found myself taking on hunts on my own. But with that trust came greater responsibility and greater danger. One night, Gabriel sent me on a solo mission, a test, he called it. A small town had been experiencing strange occurrences, and the local authorities were at a loss. People were disappearing, and those who remained spoke of shadows that moved in the night, of whispers that echoed through the empty streets. I was nervous, but I knew this was something I had to do. I couldn't rely on Gabriel forever. I had to prove to myself that I was capable of standing on my own. The town was eerie, abandoned, with an air of stillness that set my teeth on edge. As I walked through the streets, I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Every creak, every whisper of the wind, made my heart race. But I pushed forward, determined to find the source of the disturbance. It didn't take long to find it. In the basement of an old house on the edge of town, I came face to face with the creature responsible for the disappearances. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. Its body was twisted, its skin pale and translucent, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to stretch out into the darkness. It moved with unnatural speed, and for a moment, I thought I was done for. But all those months of training with Gabriel had prepared me for this. I fought with everything I had, every lesson Gabriel had taught me running through my mind. In the end, I managed to banish the creature, but not without a cost. The town was safe, but I had seen something in that basement, something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. When I returned to Gabriel, he didn't say much. He never did, but I could tell he was proud of me. I had passed his test, and in doing so, I had taken my first real step toward becoming a true hunter. But the victory was bittersweet. I had seen the cost of this life, the isolation, the loss, the constant battle against forces that were far beyond our control. And I knew that there was no going back. This was my life now, for better or worse. Gabriel and I continued to hunt together, but something had changed. I was no longer just his apprentice, I was his equal. And as we faced each new challenge, each new threat, I found myself becoming more and more like him. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. By the end of that year, I had seen more than most people would in a lifetime. I had fought demons, spirits, and creatures that defied explanation. But with every victory came a new challenge, a new threat lurking just around the corner. Gabriel and I never stopped hunting. We couldn't. The darkness never rested, and neither could we. But through it all, we remained a team, two hunters against the world, fighting a battle that most people didn't even know was being waged. As I sit here now, looking back on everything that's happened, I realize that I'm not the same person I was when I left home. I'm not the rebellious kid who didn't care about anyone or anything. I'm a hunter, and this is my life. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows seem to creep closer, I wonder, what will happen when the day comes that we face something we can't beat? What will happen when the darkness finally wins? I don't have an answer for that. All I know is that as long as I'm still breathing, I'll keep fighting. Because that's what Gabriel taught me. And in the end, it's the only thing that matters. This was just the beginning of Ethan's journey into the unknown. But what happens when they face a force beyond their control? Don't miss the next episode, where Ethan and Gabriel uncover a darker, more sinister threat. Thank you so much for watching this episode of our horror series. We truly appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest episodes. We have so much more in store for you, and we can't wait to share it. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and may good fortune follow you wherever you go.